Downsizing. There is no downside to downsizing. In life, when you try to make a decision, you try to evaluate what's the upside and what's the downside. And you try to make the decision that has more upside than down. It's risk management. It's evaluating. It's a calculation in the mind. And so when you get to the point in life that you are considering downsizing, for me, in my evaluation, there is very little to no downside when it comes to downsizing. The only problem or the biggest barrier when it comes to downsizing is the mental battle, the emotional attachment to things, but not even that, because I think that's another just like a cliche thing to say. It's really the emotional barrier of you resisting change. There's really no downside to downsizing. You're going to have lower expenses. You're going to have less stuff to take care of. If you're even thinking about downsizing, then you realize you have a lot of stuff you don't need, you don't use. So there's upside. What's the downside of throwing something out? In your mind, you may think, well, maybe I'll need it one day, but chances are you will never need it, and you know that. And even if you did need something, how much you're going to cut your expenses, you're going to cut your emotional burdens to taking care of things. So you could always buy something else in Walmart to replace it. But the mind has a barrier, not because you're emotionally attached to things, but because you're emotionally resistant to change. Once you throw something out, you close a chapter in your life. And that's what you're really scared of when it comes to downsizing. You permanently change your life. Many people wait till they are quote unquote senior citizens, 60 years or older, to throw out stuff and to downsize. Because at that point, they have come to the realization that their kids are moved out, or they're going to move out, or they're going to live with them forever. And their lifespan is closing in on them. The average human lifespan is 80 years old. So they get to a point in their 60s, 70s, and they say, look, I haven't used this stuff in years. My kids are grown. They have no need for it. I can't give this stuff away. It's too much of a burden to sell it on eBay. I have to make a decision. But then the resistance of change and the low energy that you have when you get older is the barrier. That's why I promote that if you want, downsize as early as possible. Downsize if you're in your 20s. Downsize if you're in your 30s, 40s, etc. Because you have energy and you're not, and you have the ability to adapt and change more. As you get older, you resist change more, and it's harder to downsize. But you get to a certain age, you say, my kids are grown, life is different, I have to change, but you don't have the energy. The mind is a little bit more resistant to change, and it's an uphill battle. But if you think about the fact that people don't use 80% of what they own, if you think about the fact that the more stuff you have, the more money it costs, and the more time and energy it takes to maintain it. It takes time to clean things. It takes time to store things. Storage units in America are $1 billion industry. A storage unit is when you pay someone else to hold stuff that you don't use. Think about that. A storage unit is when you pay someone else to store things that you're not using. What is the downside? What is the downside to downsizing? Basically nothing. The barrier is not the emotional attachment, but the emotional resistance to change, to closing a chapter, and to exerting energy, because it takes energy to downsize. I think it takes 2 years to downsize, and I think you have to be in good physical condition, because the stress, never minimize the stress of downsizing. It's stressful. It's a huge relief when you complete it, but during the process, very hard. Very hard. First you start, you get all excited, you throw away like the little things that, you know you don't really want. Then you get to a wall where it's like, really, here's now I got to throw away some stuff I've had for years, or that cost a lot of money, or that still has the tags on it and it's brand new and it could be used. From someone who owned a house for 15 years and threw out, downsized, got rid of everything. I live out of my car I have for 2 years. I live out of one bag in my back seat. I can tell you, by the grace of God, I'm very mentally strong. I could still be broken, and I have been broken. And I have a level of high energy. But that being said, the hardest part about downsizing was throwing stuff away, specifically clothes that still had the tags on them. But I got to my point in my mid-30s and I said, look, I see the senior citizens who struggle with downsizing. They don't have the energy. They don't have the mind capacity. They're never going to live their dream. They're on the phone during the course of the day talking to their doctor about the lump on their head or the discomfort that they're having, and they're dealing with the regular life burdens. And now on top of that, they have to throw out stuff that they've had for 60 plus years. And then if they have to deal with real estate agents or selling property, it's too overwhelming. And they say, screw it. I'm going to die in this house. I don't want that to be you if you don't want it to be you. And if you're watching a video about there's no downside to downsizing, there's something in you that at least is curious. In my life experience, I've met people on extreme minimalism and people who have a lot of things, but I've never heard, in my experience, I've never heard of one person that regretted downsizing. Never. I've all heard, and I've shared as well, downsizing can be very painful mentally. But I've never heard of someone says after they did it that I regret doing it. Think about that. Peace and love.